The first strike. They came as friends, speaking words of peace and trade, offering knowledge and technology that seemed too good to be true. The Kalari Empire had watched Earth from the shadows for 3 years before making contact, studying human behavior, learning our languages, mapping our defenses. When their sleek silver ships finally appeared over major cities 6 months ago, they brought gifts and smiles that seemed genuine. Ambassador Zethkar became a household name, his tall, graceful form and melodic voice appearing on every news channel as he spoke of cooperation between species. But humanity was about to learn that some gifts come with a price too terrible to imagine. Commander Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of Luna Base, watching Earth rise over the lunar horizon like a blue marble against the star-filled void. At 35, she had dedicated her life to protecting humanity's first steps into space. The base housed 15,000 people, military personnel, scientists, engineers, and their families. Children played in the recreation centers while their parents worked on projects that would secure humanity's future among the stars. Sarah had helped design many of the defensive systems herself, though she never imagined they would be needed against beings who claimed to come in peace. Dr. Marcus Reed hurried through the corridors of the xenobiology lab, his tablet displaying the latest analysis of Kalari technology samples. As humanity's leading expert on alien biology, he had spent months studying tissue samples and technological components that the Kalari had freely shared. Something bothered him about the cellular structure, something that didn't match their claims about their homeworld's environment. The pieces of a puzzle were forming in his mind, but he couldn't quite see the complete picture yet. His assistant, Dr. Lisa Park, looked up from her microscope with concern etched across her face. On the main communication deck, Maya Patel monitored the steady stream of data flowing between Luna Base and the Kalari vessels, positioned throughout the solar system. As Earth's primary communications officer for the First Contact project, she had learned to speak basic Kalari and had developed genuine friendships with several of their communications staff. The aliens seemed genuinely curious about human culture, asking endless questions about art, music, and literature. Their fascination with human emotional expression had led to hours of cultural exchange that Maya treasured. She had no idea that every conversation was being recorded and analyzed for weaknesses. The attack came without warning at 0347 hours, Earth Standard Time. Maya was reviewing the day's communication logs when her screens erupted in chaos. Kalari vessels throughout the system opened fire simultaneously, their weapon systems coming online with devastating precision. The first target was Luna Base's communication array, severing humanity's primary link to Earth in a blaze of superheated plasma. Sarah felt the station shake as secondary explosions rippled through the structure. Emergency klaxons screamed through corridors as families ran for shelter that would never come. Ambassador Zethkar's voice filled the communication channels, but the warm tones humanity had grown to trust were replaced by cold efficiency. His holographic image appeared on screens throughout Luna Base, his previously kind eyes now hard as diamonds. The translation came through clearly, each word striking like a physical blow. The Kalari Empire had determined that humanity posed a potential threat to galactic stability. Earth's rapid technological advancement and aggressive expansion into space violated several galactic treaties that humans had never been told existed. The Kalari had tried to guide humanity toward peaceful coexistence, but Earth's military preparations made conflict inevitable. Sarah grabbed her communications officer by the shoulder as another explosion rocked the station. Maya's face was pale with shock and betrayal as she tried to process what was happening. The aliens they had welcomed as friends were systematically destroying everything they had built. Through the observation windows, they could see Kalari, fighters strafing the lunar surface installations with surgical precision. Each strike eliminated critical systems, power generators, defensive batteries, escape pod launchers. The aliens had studied Luna Base for months, identifying every weakness and vulnerability. Dr. Reed's laboratory erupted in sparks as the power grid fluctuated wildly. His research data, years of work on alien biology and technology, was being destroyed in the systematic assault. But in those final moments before the computers died, he saw something in his analysis that made his blood run cold. The Kalari tissue samples showed adaptation to high radiation environments, far beyond what they had claimed about their homeworld. Their technology relied on quantum field manipulation that was extremely sensitive to electromagnetic interference. Most importantly, their biological systems were vulnerable to specific types of radiation that Earth's nuclear technology produced as a byproduct. The first wave of plasma bombardment turned entire sections of Luna Base into molten metal and scattered atoms. 15,000 human beings, men, women, children, scientists, soldiers, dreamers, died in the space of 6 minutes. Sarah and a handful of survivors huddled in the reinforced command center as the station's life support systems failed around them. Through failing communication links, she managed to send a single message to Earth Defense Command before the transmitters were destroyed. The message contained Dr. Reed's final analysis and a warning that would change everything. General Thompson received the transmission at Earth Defense Headquarters, deep beneath the Colorado mountains. A career military officer with 40 years of experience, he had opposed the open-door policy with the Kalari from the beginning. His concerns about alien intentions had been dismissed as paranoia and xenophobia. Now, as he watched the destruction of Luna Base through long-range telescopes, his worst fears were being realized. The Kalari had used humanity's trust against them, studying their defenses while posing as friends. The casualty reports were still coming in, but early estimates suggested 15,000 dead in the first strike. President Elena Martinez convened an emergency session of the Global Defense Council within an hour of the attack. World leaders who had spent decades arguing over territorial disputes and resource allocation suddenly found themselves united by a common threat. The Kalari ultimatum arrived as they were still counting the dead. Ambassador Zethkar's image appeared on screens around the world, his message translated into every human language simultaneously. Earth had 72 hours to surrender unconditionally and submit to Kalari oversight. All military installations would be dismantled, all space-based assets would be transferred to Kalari control, and humanity would accept permanent restrictions on technological development. The terms were non-negotiable. Any attempt at resistance would result in the complete sterilization of Earth's surface. The Kalari fleet possessed weapons capable of cracking continents and boiling oceans. They had destroyed civilizations before, and they would not hesitate to add humanity to that list. Earth's primitive nuclear weapons and chemical rockets were no match for technology that could manipulate matter at the quantum level. The message ended with footage of Luna Base burning in the vacuum of space, a reminder of what happened to those who opposed the Kalari Empire. Dr. Elena Vasquez studied Dr. Reed's final transmission from her laboratory at the International Space Defense Center. As Earth's leading nuclear physicist, she understood the implications of the biological analysis immediately. The Kalari had made a critical error in their assessment of human technology. They viewed nuclear weapons as primitive devices, crude, tools that produced more radiation than explosive force. What they failed to understand was that humans had spent decades perfecting the art of controlled nuclear reactions. The radiation signatures that made their technology so efficient also made them vulnerable to specific types of electromagnetic interference. Admiral Liu assembled the remnants of Earth's space fleet in hidden shipyards throughout the solar system. The Kalari believed they had destroyed humanity's military capability with the Luna Base attack, but they had only eliminated the visible assets. Earth's governments had learned from history's lessons about keeping reserve forces hidden from potential enemies. Deep space monitoring stations went dark one by one, their crews activating protocols that would make them invisible to Kalari sensors. Humanity's response was beginning to take shape in the shadows. Captain Jake Morrison received his orders aboard the stealth ship Whisper, one of 12 vessels designed specifically for covert operations. The ship's hull was covered in metamaterials that absorbed sensor radiation rather than reflecting it, making it virtually invisible to standard detection systems. His crew of 15 specialists had trained for scenarios just like this, though none of them had expected to face alien invaders. Their mission was simple in concept, but nearly impossible in execution: infiltrate the Kalari fleet and gather intelligence for humanity's counterattack. The Kalari fleet maintained position throughout the solar system, their massive vessels casting shadows across Earth's communication satellites. They monitored human broadcast frequencies, expecting to hear panic and desperate pleas for mercy. Instead, they encountered something they had never experienced in centuries of conquest: complete silence. Earth's governments made no public statements. Military communications went dark. Even civilian broadcasts ceased after the first few hours. The planet that had been buzzing with electromagnetic activity for over a century suddenly became as quiet as a tomb. Commander Kythek of the Kalari Imperial Fleet found the silence unsettling. In previous conquests, species had responded to ultimatums with either immediate surrender or desperate last stands. Humans were doing neither. Intelligence reports suggested that Earth's governments were still functioning, but they were communicating through channels that Kalari sensors couldn't detect. The fleet commander had expected humanity to collapse into chaos and infighting when faced with extinction. Instead, the entire planet seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something. As the 72-hour deadline approached, the Kalari began to realize they might have underestimated their enemy. The humans had shown remarkable unity in the face of annihilation, putting aside centuries of conflict to face a common threat. Their technology might be primitive, but their capacity for coordination and adaptation was unlike anything the Kalari had encountered. Most disturbing of all was the complete communications blackout. Species on the verge of extinction didn't usually have the discipline for such coordinated silence. The final hours ticked away as Earth remained dark and quiet. Kalari sensors detected no military preparations, no mass evacuations, no signs of panic. The planet spun peacefully in the void, its cities glowing with normal activity while its governments maintained perfect silence. Ambassador Zethkar prepared his final ultimatum, confident that humanity would surrender when faced with the alternative. The Kalari had destroyed civilizations across the galaxy, and humans would be no different. But in the depths of space, where no Kalari sensors could reach, humanity's response was already in motion. 12 stealth ships moved through the void like ghosts, their crews preparing for the most important mission in human history. Earth's silence wasn't surrender. It was the calm before a storm that would teach the galaxy a lesson about the species they had chosen to underestimate. The Kalari had started this war with deception and massacre, but they were about to learn that humanity had its own ideas about how it would end. The counterstrike. The 72-hour deadline passed in complete silence. No surrender came from Earth, no desperate pleas for mercy, no last-minute negotiations. The blue planet continued its rotation as if nothing had changed, as if 15,000 humans hadn't died in the Luna Base massacre. Commander Kythek of the Kalari Imperial Fleet waited for some sign of response, but his sensors detected only the normal electromagnetic signatures of a functioning civilization. The silence was unnerving in a way that no amount of military posturing could have been. In all their centuries of conquest, the Kalari had never encountered a species that responded to ultimatums with such perfect, coordinated quiet. Captain Jake Morrison and his crew aboard the stealth ship Whisper had spent the last 3 days moving through the outer edges of the solar system, their vessel's metamaterial hull rendering them invisible to Kalari sensors. The ship's design incorporated breakthrough technologies that Earth scientists had developed in secret, preparing for the possibility that humanity's expansion into space might attract unwanted attention. Morrison's crew included specialists in alien technology, nuclear physics, and combat operations. Each had volunteered for a mission that would likely end in death, but might give humanity its only chance for survival. Dr. Elena Vasquez worked frantically in her underground laboratory, using Dr. Reed's final transmission to develop weapons that could exploit the Kalari's biological vulnerabilities. The alien tissue samples had revealed a dependency on quantum field manipulation for their basic cellular functions. This made them incredibly efficient at processing energy and information, but it also meant they were vulnerable to specific types of electromagnetic interference. Earth's nuclear weapons produced exactly the right kind of radiation signatures as a byproduct of their fusion reactions. With careful modification, those weapons could be turned into something far more devastating than mere explosives. The Kalari fleet consisted of 7 massive vessels, each one capable of destroying a planetary surface with sustained bombardment. Their technology was based on principles that humanity barely understood: matter manipulation at the quantum level, faster-than-light communication, and energy generation that seemed to violate the laws of physics. But Dr. Vasquez had discovered their weakness. The same quantum fields that made their technology so advanced also made it incredibly sensitive to certain types of radiation. A properly calibrated nuclear device wouldn't just damage their ships, it would cause a cascade failure that would spread throughout their entire fleet. Admiral Liu coordinated the operation from a hidden command center, buried deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. Earth's governments had spent decades preparing for various apocalyptic scenarios, and alien invasion had been one of the possibilities considered by military planners. The infrastructure was already in place: hardened communication networks, hidden supply caches, and contingency plans that could be activated without alerting potential enemies. The Kalari had studied humanity's visible military assets, but they had no idea about the shadow networks that operated beneath the surface. Captain Morrison's team located the Kalari command vessel, using passive sensors that detected the quantum field emissions from their technology. The alien ship was positioned near Mars, where it could coordinate the fleet's activities while remaining safely distant from Earth's defensive systems. The vessel was massive, nearly 10 kilometers long and bristling with weapons that could sterilize a planet. Its hull was composed of materials that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, adapting to different environmental conditions automatically. To the Kalari, it represented the pinnacle of their technological achievement. To humanity, it was about to become the key to their survival. The stealth approach took 18 hours of careful maneuvering through the debris field around Mars. Morrison's crew had to avoid detection by not only the command vessel but also the automated sensor drones that the Kalari had deployed throughout the system. Each drone was capable of detecting even the smallest electromagnetic signature. But Earth's stealth technology had been designed specifically to counter such systems. The Whisper moved through space like a ghost, its hull absorbing sensor radiation and venting heat through carefully designed channels that dispersed the thermal signature across a wide area. Dr. Vasquez's modifications to the nuclear warheads were complete. Instead of traditional fusion explosives, the devices now contained carefully calibrated radiation generators that would produce interference patterns specifically tuned to disrupt Kalari quantum field technology. Each warhead had been equipped with quantum entanglement communicators that would allow for simultaneous detonation across multiple targets. The weapons were untested, but computer simulations suggested they would be devastatingly effective against the alien technology. The question was whether humanity could get them close enough to the Kalari fleet without being detected. The final phase of the mission began as Morrison's team prepared to board the Kalari command vessel. Their suits were equipped with the same metamaterial technology as their ship, making them virtually invisible to alien sensors. Each team member carried a modified nuclear device, small enough to be concealed but powerful enough to cripple the massive alien ship. The boarding operation would be suicide. There was no way to escape once the devices were activated. But the team had volunteered knowing the odds, understanding that their sacrifice might save billions of lives on Earth. Commander Kythek grew increasingly agitated as Earth's silence stretched beyond the deadline. The Kalari High Command had expected either surrender or desperate resistance, not this unnerving quiet. His sensors detected no military preparations, no evacuation efforts, no signs of panic among the human population. The cities continued to function normally, their lights glowing peacefully in the darkness. It was as if the entire species had collectively decided to ignore the ultimatum. The commander ordered increased surveillance, but his scanners found nothing unusual. Earth seemed to be waiting for something, but what? The boarding operation commenced at 0200 hours, 74 hours after the original ultimatum. Morrison's team used microcharges to create a small breach in the Kalari hull, their entry point carefully chosen to avoid critical systems. The interior of the alien vessel was unlike anything humans had seen. Corridors that seemed to bend and flow like living tissue, walls that glowed with their own internal light, and atmospheric conditions that felt thick and humid despite being perfectly breathable. The team moved through the ship like shadows, their metamaterial suits keeping them invisible to the organic sensors that lined the walls. The Kalari crew members they encountered were tall and graceful, their movements fluid and purposeful. They communicated through complex harmonics that their universal translators couldn't fully decode, but their behavior suggested routine operations rather than high alert. The aliens had no idea that their ship had been infiltrated. Morrison's team reached the core systems after 2 hours of careful movement through the vessel's maze-like interior. The quantum field generators that powered the ship were massive, crystalline structures that hummed with barely contained energy. Placing the nuclear devices next to these generators would amplify the cascade effect beyond Dr. Vasquez's most optimistic projections. Earth's silence was finally broken after 76 hours. The transmission came from every communication satellite, every radio station, every network hub simultaneously. President Martinez's voice carried across the solar system in dozens of languages, her words reaching every Kalari vessel at once. The message was simple and devastating in its implications. Humanity rejected the ultimatum. Earth would not surrender, would not submit to alien oversight, and would not accept restrictions on their technological development. The Kalari had made a fatal error in their assessment of human nature. They had mistaken kindness for weakness, cooperation for submission. The transmission continued with information that sent shockwaves through the Kalari fleet. Earth scientists had analyzed the alien tissue samples and discovered the quantum field dependencies that made their technology possible. More importantly, they had identified the specific radiation frequencies that could disrupt those fields. Humanity's nuclear weapons, dismissed by the Kalari as primitive explosives, had been modified to produce exactly those frequencies. The devices were already in position throughout the alien fleet, placed by stealth teams that had infiltrated every major vessel during the 72-hour silence. Commander Kythek's display screens erupted in warnings as his ship's sensors detected the human infiltrators for the first time. The quantum field generators were already beginning to destabilize as the modified nuclear devices activated their preliminary phases. The cascade effect was starting, and there was no way to stop it. The Kalari had faced many enemies in their centuries of conquest, but they had never encountered a species that could turn their own technological superiority against them. The humans had used the time given by the ultimatum not to surrender, but to prepare a counterstrike that would cripple the entire invasion fleet. The nuclear devices detonated simultaneously across all 7 Kalari vessels. The explosions themselves were relatively small, but their effect on the alien quantum field technology was catastrophic. Power systems failed in cascading waves, artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, and the organic hull materials began to break down at the molecular level. The massive ships that had seemed invulnerable just minutes earlier now drifted helplessly in space, their crews struggling to maintain basic life support systems. The Kalari's greatest technological achievement had become their greatest vulnerability. Dr. Vasquez monitored the results from her underground laboratory, watching as her theoretical predictions became devastating reality. The quantum field collapse was spreading faster than even her optimistic projections had suggested. The Kalari ships weren't just disabled, they were literally coming apart as their fundamental technology failed. The aliens who had seemed so advanced and powerful were now refugees in their own vessels, dependent on primitive backup systems that barely functioned. The species that had conquered civilizations across the galaxy had been brought low by what they considered primitive human technology. Captain Morrison and his team didn't survive the boarding operation, but their sacrifice had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. The Kalari Imperial Fleet, which had never suffered a defeat in 5 centuries of expansion, was crippled and defenseless. The quantum field generators that powered their weapons, shields, and life support systems had been reduced to inert crystal formations. The survivors would need to rely on mechanical systems that their technology had made obsolete millennia ago. They were stranded in a solar system controlled by the very species they had tried to exterminate. Admiral Liu received damage reports from observation posts throughout the solar system. The Kalari fleet was completely disabled, their ships drifting powerless in the void. Some vessels had lost hull integrity and were venting atmosphere, while others struggled to maintain basic systems with backup power. The aliens who had demanded humanity's surrender were now at the mercy of the species they had underestimated. Earth's governments faced a choice. They could destroy the helpless alien vessels, or they could demonstrate the mercy that the Kalari had failed to show. The final transmission came from Earth 12 hours after the counterstrike. The Resident Pry. Martinez's voice once again filled the communication channels, but this time, her words carried a different message. Humanity had proven that they could defend themselves against technological superiority through ingenuity and determination. The Kalari fleet was disabled but not destroyed, their crews alive but helpless. Earth offered the aliens a choice. They could surrender and face trial for their crimes, or they could attempt to leave the solar system with whatever primitive technology they could cobble together from their failing ships. Ambassador Zethkar, his holographic image flickering due to power failures aboard his vessel, made his final transmission to Earth. The Kalari had underestimated humanity in every possible way. They had mistaken Earth's openness for naivety, their cooperation for weakness, their diversity for division. The humans had used the Kalari's own assumptions against them, turning technological superiority into vulnerability through pure ingenuity. The ambassador's words carried a warning that would spread throughout the galaxy. Humanity was not a species to be underestimated. The Kalari High Council's emergency session convened as reports of the fleet's destruction reached their home world. In 5 centuries of expansion, they had never encountered a species capable of turning their own technology against them. The humans had demonstrated abilities that challenged the fundamental assumptions of galactic civilization. Most disturbing was the realization that Earth's apparent primitiveness had been an illusion. The humans had been preparing for this possibility from the moment first contact was established. Earth's response to the Kalari ultimatum became legendary throughout the galaxy. The story spread from species to species, world to world, system to system. A primitive planet had defeated the most powerful military force in known space through ingenuity, determination, and the kind of unified response that most civilizations considered impossible. The humans had turned their perceived weaknesses into strengths, using their diversity and adaptability to overcome technological disadvantages that should have been insurmountable. The lesson was clear to every civilization that heard the story. Humanity had earned its place among the stars not through conquest or intimidation, but through the demonstration of capabilities that even the most advanced species had never imagined. The Kalari Empire's attempt to subjugate Earth had backfired spectacularly, creating a new power in galactic politics. The species that had been dismissed as primitive and chaotic had proven that underestimating human ingenuity was a mistake that even the mightiest empires couldn't afford to make. As the crippled Kalari vessels limped toward the edge of the solar system, their quantum field technology permanently damaged, humanity began to understand the true implications of their victory. They had not just defended their world, they had announced their presence to the galaxy in a way that would never be forgotten. The silent response to the Kalari ultimatum had spoken louder than any declaration of war, proving that some species were too dangerous to threaten, too clever to underestimate, and too determined to ever surrender.